Now, The Hunt Palmer Show.
Yes! I feel like I've been waiting for this my entire life.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
Jolly good fun. Jolly good.
Locking down the middle of the day.
America's favorite daytime fun show.
Live from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio. This is Hunt Palmer.
Welcome in. Hunt Palmer coming to you from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio downtown in the capital city on this Tuesday. Hope your work week's off to a good start. Appreciate you hanging out with us here on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge. Got Jacob Beck and Cassie Spazzali back there on the ones and twos, and lots to do over the next couple of hours. Glen West in his normal spot there at 1:30. Sharif Ishak will touch base with us at 2:30. Derek Carr has been not ruled out for the year, but the return is feeling a little bit unlikely. I'll talk about that in 15 minutes. We'll get to it with Sharif as well in hour number 2. LSU plays Stetson in basketball tonight. Stetson is not very good, but we're going to talk about him anyway at the top of hour number 2, straight up 2 o'clock. It's an 8 o'clock tip inside the PMAC tonight. Toys for Tots. If you bring a toy, $5 ticket at the PMAC. So looking for something to do, kiddos out of school potentially, and want to do something this evening, Stetson at LSU. That's an option. I'll talk about it coming up a little bit later. We'll start the same way we start each and every day, and that is with our Genesis Opening Drive.
It's time for Hunt's Opening Drive, presented by Genesis of Baton Rouge.
Transfer portal continues to churn folks in and out. LSU secured a commitment, according to Sam Spiegelman of Rivals earlier today. Destin Hill, a New Orleans native, Edna Carr product, who was actually a senior in high school 3 years ago in 2021, has reportedly committed to LSU from Florida State. Now, it's an interesting story with Destin Hill because he was an elite prospect in that same class that had Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas and Chris Hilton and Jack Besh, and LSU brought in that class a couple other wide receivers that didn't end up panning out. But I mean, it was a loaded crop in Louisiana, and he decided to commit to Florida State, but he didn't actually enroll and join the football team until 2023. And then when he did, he was a 21-year-old freshman. He played against LSU in that 2023 game, season opener over in Orlando. And played in 10 games as a 21-year-old true freshman. Then in spring ball last year, this year, but last season, he got hurt and he missed this entire year at Florida State with an injury. So you're talking about a 22, 23-year-old young man who has played 10 games of football in the last, what will be 4 years. So this is a guy that they bring in, a big-time speed guy, played with Aaron Anderson at Carr, and he's just an addition depth-wise into the room, but not a guy who's had a big impact on the football field in a substantial amount of time. But I wanted to take this time with Destin Hill committing to look at what LSU's wide receiver room looks like now, because you had a lot of concern with Kyron Lacey moving out, with C.J. Daniels kind of, to some, surprisingly entering the transfer portal. And so you're kind of looking around going, well, Lacey led you in yards with 866 this past year, and he scored 9 touchdowns. That was the leader for you as well. Mason Taylor was your second leader in terms of number of receptions. He's obviously moving on to the draft. And then C.J. Daniels was 4th on your team in receptions. Josh Williams was 5th, and he's moving on. So, you have a lot of production to replace from a pass-catching standpoint. You look at what you had coming back, and it looks like, as of right now, all of these guys are coming back. Aaron Anderson announced he'll return. He had 53 catches for you, had just under 800 yards, 5 touchdowns, which was second on the team, and we all think had a breakout year. Of course, the highlight was probably the 76-yarder he took to the house against Texas A&M, but he showed you that he can stretch the field a little bit, did that in the South Carolina game, and of course, he can work the slot. He's incredibly shifty and quick, and that's a guy who's got big-time playmaking potential. You saw it with the kickoff return for a touchdown a couple weeks ago, so that's a guy you bring back, and he's your most proven commodity catching the football. Xavier Thomas is what he is. He had 20 catches this year for 188 yards, had a couple touchdowns. You can get him involved in the passing game. Is he going to be a number one option? No. But is he explosive? Is he a guy that defensive coordinators have to account for when he's on the field, especially sideline to sideline? Yeah, and that's kind of his role here. We know Chris Hilton's story by now. Elite speed. Saw it in the game against Oklahoma. 2 touchdowns. Maybe that's a guy that stays healthy and becomes a really productive player for you, but he hasn't necessarily proven that. And you got Kyle Parker coming off of an injury. You've got Jelani Watkins, who's probably the fastest guy on your team. I go back to my conversation with Dennis Shaver, LSU's track coach, every single Saturday on the pregame show. I talked to another head coach on campus for like 5 or 6 minutes, and Coach Shaver came on early in the season, and I point blank asked him, I was like, are Caden Durham and Jelani Watkins legitimately fast enough to run track at LSU? Not to run track in college, not to go over to Hammond and run track, not to run at McNeese, not to go run track at UTEP. Like, can they run track at LSU where y'all win national championships? And Dennis Shaver said, yes. Just point blank, yes. Jelani Watkins, huge speed. He's still in the fold. And then Kylan Billiot as well, who was a freshman on this team, did not get any playoff time. So that's 6 guys. Anderson, Xavier Thomas, Chris Hilton, Kyle Parker, Jelani Watkins, and Kylan Billiot. And truthfully, like, that's not nearly enough in terms of talent or depth. You had to go add in this transfer portal cycle, as well as the high school ranks. And in the high school ranks, you got involved with some of the best wide receivers in the country, and you came up short with those guys. So you end up with Teron Francis, you come up with Phillip Wright, and those are 2 in-state players that you feel like are talented, but you're not talking about DeCorian Moore. You're not talking about Khalik Lockett. You're not talking about Jamie French. Like, these are the elite 5-star guys you were in the mix for. You didn't get those guys, but you get a couple of in-state guys. And look, we've seen plenty of in-state wide receivers that weren't quite as heralded from South Louisiana show up and ball. So you bring them in. That's 2 more guys. And then you go to the transfer portal and you grab Berrien Brown and Destin Hill. Berrien Brown, big-time speed guy, kickoff return guy, pretty good size. Destin Hill, speed guy as well, but a guy that hasn't produced much in 4 years of football. So your numbers are good now. That's a total of 10 guys with your 6 returners, 2 portals, 2 transfers. 10 wide receivers is enough. I still think they're 1 guy short, and I think that guy is Nick Anderson. You bring Nick Anderson into this fold, and I think that other guys start to fall into place. I think you bring Nick Anderson in as the most proven SEC playmaking big body on your roster. He had 10 touchdowns at Oklahoma as a freshman. That set the Oklahoma record. And he was hurt all this year after week 2, so we didn't see his sophomore campaign. But by all accounts, he's ready to go now. And if you can get that guy in, then I think that becomes Nick Anderson as your number 1, with Aaron Anderson as a very strong number 2. I'm okay putting Chris Hilton in there as a number 3 option with the ability to do what he does, which is stretch the field. And then if you can get something out of Berrien Brown and Kyle Parker and Xavier Thomas as kind of that 4th option, which, truth be told, you don't often go down to your 4th guy. Like, the greatest passing offense we've ever seen at LSU in 2019, you had Chase and Jefferson at the top. You had Terrace Marshall right there behind them. And then you basically had Thad Moss, and, like, who was next? Like, it didn't matter. Like, that's enough guys, if you're healthy, to be a really good receiving core. I'm less comfortable with Aaron Anderson as your 1, and then, like, Berrien Brown and Chris Hilton as your, like, number 2 options. That feels like you're pushing it a little bit. I'd really rather slot Nick Anderson at the top here and then have it funnel backwards. I thought that Kyron Lacey did a really good job, and I think that Nick Anderson can fill in very admirably for Kyron Lacey. And I thought your receiving core was okay this year. It was not great. Thought it was okay. But you're bringing in more talent in Berrien Brown, and I think Aaron Anderson is more proven than he was September, October of this year. So I think Nick Anderson remains a key. What we're being told right now, if you read the folks over at On 3, I spent some time over at Texags today, LSU and Texas A&M are right in the mix for this thing for Nick Anderson. It's basically Texas A&M selling him on playing at home. He's from Katy, right outside of Houston. Texas A&M selling him on being close to family at Texas A&M and playing in a room that doesn't really have a lot of proven commodities in it. They just brought in Micah Hudson, a 5-star from Texas Tech, but he didn't really do a lot. So you don't have a ton of proven guys at wide receiver. Texas A&M Anderson kind of becomes the cream of the crop pretty quickly there. LSU is selling him on, hey, Did you see their passing offense? It's terrible. Did you see ours? We throw it all over the place. We're top 10 in the country. Come play for us. And then we'll see where the NIL stuff falls out, and we obviously know that that's the case. But no one who's reporting on this situation is going to be comfortable tossing real numbers around for NIL. Like, that's not generally stuff that comes out immediately. So I think you're going to talk about two programs that are very interested in Nick Anderson, that have hosted him for visits, that have NIL money to spend, and then that's the pitch outside of that, those two. And so we'll see where things shake out. The feeling is that it's 1:10 on Tuesday right now. By 5 p.m. on Wednesday, Nick Anderson will have committed. And if I go to commercial break in the next 2.5 minutes and he's committed then, I won't be shocked. This thing is really close. He's seeing what he needs to see. He's down to 2 schools, and we'll see what he does. If LSU lands Nick Anderson, I think you can realistically look at this wide receiver room and go, that's enough talent to compete at an elite level in college football. You've done enough by going to get Nick Anderson, Berrien Brown, Destin Hill, Teron Francis, Phillip Wright, and keeping Anderson and Hilton in the mix. You've got enough guys to go win at wide receiver at this point. I'm a little uncomfortable with where it sits right now, but I think you could land Nick Anderson shortly, and I think that'd be a really, really good thing for LSU. That is my Genesis opening drive here on this Tuesday. Every car on the lot is online at genesisofbatonrouge.com. When we come back, report from Ian Rappaport on Derek Carr about his hand injury. Nick Underhill has chimed in with a little bit of a conflicting information, but I'll give you my thoughts on what should happen here for the last 3 weeks with Derek Carr. That's next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Audio Video Security Solutions, AVSSLA.com. Instagram is an incredible resource for AVSS because it allows you to log on and take a look at some of the great projects that they've undertaken over there. It's AVSS_BR. That's the handle on Instagram. Go check it out. They do fantastic work there. Mitchell was telling me a couple months ago, and I brought this up previously, about a project they did out on a dock. There was a house that had waterfront property to it, and a lot of folks down there on their piers, whether you're at the lake or wherever the case may be, struggle with Wi-Fi and trying to connect smart devices to it and play with your speakers. And you want to have great sound quality down there, but sometimes the internet doesn't work out. Well, Mitchell Fisher and his team went down there. They wired it properly. They got the internet boosted, and all of a sudden now you've got a situation where you can sit out there on the water and not can be concerned with whether or not the baby monitor will reach out there, whether or not your phone can stream anything out there. Your music's going to be loud and clear. That was one thing he did, and he said that's something that they would like to do moving forward in the future. If you've got some waterfront property, whether it's Diversion Canal or False River or wherever the case may be, and you struggle with internet down there, Audio Video Security Solutions can help you with all of that. Give Mitchell Fisher a call, 225-439-7920. Again, 225-439-7920. It's Audio Video Security Solutions, online at avssla.com.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show, hosted by the Goo Goo Dolls' #1 fan, Hunt Palmer.
Chat with Glen West, Go 24/7 senior writer, coming up here in 15 minutes. We'll talk some Tiger basketball as well as a little bit of football with Glen. Always look forward to that conversation. Sharif Ishak coming up in an hour and 15 minutes, and we'll chat with Sharif Ishak about the news in Saints land today. And that came from Ian Rappaport, who obviously covers the NFL nationally for NFL Network and NFL.com. And he had a tweet that he fired off earlier today about Derek Carr's future over the next 3 weeks. The tweet read, sources say Saints quarterback Derek Carr underwent further examination recently, and he's at least a few weeks away from being able to withstand contact. With 3 weeks remaining, a return this season is described as very unlikely. Carr has been out with a left hand that had been fractured in 2 different places. So that's what Ian Rappaport had to say with NFL.com. Nick Underhill of New Orleans Football writes, and speaking with multiple sources, that Derek Carr's return this season has not been ruled out, that he's continued to work and continuing to try. I told you when we found out Derek Carr got hurt that he was going to do everything he could to get back on the field. That's just the way Derek Carr is wired. It's admirable. It's predictable in his case. He's been a professional for more than a decade in the NFL. We know last year he went out there when he shouldn't have been out there and tried to gut through it and played very, very poorly because he was in immense amounts of pain last season, but he played through it and eventually healed up, and he played much better later in the season. This year, when he got hurt, he simply could not throw a football, so it wasn't an option for him to come back and play, and that's why you saw Spencer Rattler get those 3 starts. But that's just the way Derek Carr is wired. And it's very, very admirable, as I said, for a guy that's making that kind of money to feel like, hey, the organization is invested in me. My teammates are here. I've got to do everything in my capability to get on the football field, because that's not the way everyone approaches this thing. It's just not. But it is the way that Derek Carr handles himself. And so this was predictable in terms of his effort to get back on the field. Here's the deal. Don't. Just don't. There's no need for Derek Carr to force himself to come back with a broken hand to play for a team that has no weapons on its offense, no playoff hopes, and no reason to send an aging quarterback out there that's compromised. It just doesn't make any sense. Again, I understand his sentiment, but I'm overruling it here. I realize he'll probably take that into consideration, what the guy 2 hours down the road had to say about his availability. But that's my take. There's no need for Derek Carr to go back out there and play. So here's the deal for New Orleans. In the meantime, while he's deciding whether or not he's going to play, because he's not going to play this weekend, what did the Saints do? We know when Carr initially went out in Kansas City that Haener was the backup. He was more equipped to go in with a Derek Carr game plan and try to operate the system. When they had then a week to prepare for the next game, Spencer Rattler was the more intriguing prospect, the guy they felt best about going out there and giving them a chance to win. Yes, the offensive line was banged up. Yes, Taysom Hill was out. Yes, their wide receiver weapons weren't very good. All of that we know to be the truth. But they felt like Spencer Rattler gave them the best chance, and it didn't go very well. The Saints lost all 3 games. He was inconsistent. He looked at times erratic and confused. It didn't go well. And Derek Carr returned to the lineup, and then he got hurt, and they sent Haener back out there because we know that he's the backup quarterback. When they've got a game plan in for Derek Carr, they put Haener in there. But then they had a decision to make last week. Okay, well, what do we do? Now we've got a week to prepare, and they went with Haener. And I don't know whether or not they went with Haener because they thought he gave them the best chance to win. Something had changed from the time they went to Spencer Rattler. Maybe those 3 games that Rattler started were evidence enough that Haener deserved a shot. Maybe they just wanted to split it down the middle. We gave Spencer his shot. Now we'll give Jake his shot. They're both later round draft picks. They're both working off the league minimum. Neither has proven himself to be the future of the franchise. We just feel like it's an equitable shot to go with Haener because we gave Spencer the first 3 starts there when Derek Carr went down. This time around, this week, there should be no discussion. It should be Spencer Rattler. 100 times out of 100. Because Jake Haener didn't do anything to warrant a start after that appearance last week. And Spencer Rattler, while he hasn't done much to warrant a start, the 4 straight scoring drives and the talent means it's time to give Spencer Rattler the keys to this thing for a couple of weeks. Now, let me reach here a little bit. I'm fully aware that I'm reaching, but I'm going to reach. Spencer Rattler needs to start the last 3 games of this season. That's what needs to happen. And the reason for that is because I don't care about the equitable nature of giving Rattler 3 starts in this absence of Carr and then giving Haener some starts. And this is not 6th grade basketball where everybody gets to play a quarter. This is the National Football League. This is the future of a franchise that we're talking about. And the Saints are in their most significant inflection point in 20 years. You had the run from 5 all the way to a few years ago when Breeze retired, and there wasn't really an inflection point there. Yeah, they had the 7 and 9s, and they overhauled the roster for the chemistry and all that, but your core and your pillars were there. Your coach was there. Your quarterback was there. Your coach is gone. You don't even know who it's going to be, and you don't really know who your quarterback is beyond next year. If there is a modicum of a chance that Spencer Rattler can be that guy, you've got to give it this free opportunity. You've now got an opportunity where the wins and losses don't matter. The interceptions don't matter. The fumbles don't matter. The miscommunication doesn't matter. But if there's any chance that Rattler could find something here and play really good football over the course of 3 weeks, that could change the immediate future of the franchise. Again, I am reaching. I would bet against this significantly because I don't feel like right now Spencer Rattler is the future of the franchise, but it's possible. And there is no better way to change the fortunes of your franchise than to find a quarterback on a rookie deal that can do the job. And the Saints never do that. Never, never, never. But this is an opportunity maybe to let it try to happen. And I'm not a quarterback whisperer or a guru, and nobody pays me to break down film or be a consultant for him in the quarterback room. I am well aware. But I have not seen anything out of Jay Kaner that gives me any inclination that he could be the Saints quarterback for the next 5 years. Nothing. And while it's been few and far between with Rattler, there's at least something there. You've now gotten to a point, unfortunately, where your quarterback's hurt and your playoff chances are done. Give him a month to try and see what you got. This is preseason, come to regular season. They're free reps. Just give them to Rattler and see what happens. If he fails, which is likely, whatever. If he's mediocre, which is likely, he might be a good backup for you. If there's a small chance that he's pretty good next week and then great against the Raiders and great in Tampa, there's something there you might be able to cling to. And it's worth a look. We talk about this all the time. Like, quarterbacks are so hard to come by. Y'all know this as Saints fans. You've had one your entire life. So if you've got a chance to get a quarterback on a rookie deal, and you've got a chance to move on from Derek Carr after next year, and you've got a chance to move forward and create all that flexibility with your salary cap that you never had because you've been paying your quarterback astronomical amounts of money for 20 years, isn't it worth a look? I feel bad for continuing to toss this disclaimer in it, but I feel like it's necessary. Like, I know it's a long shot, but why not try? And that's the only way to try, in my opinion, is with Spencer Rattler here. So that's my take on the entirety of the situation. I would toss the keys to Rattler, tell Derek Carr to keep that cast on his hand, and we'll see in minicamp. That's where I am on the Saints and their quarterback situation. Beck, is it an absolute waste of time to consider the fact that Spencer Rattler might be the quarterback of the Saints in the foreseeable future?
No, I don't think so. The only thing I would say in opposition to that would be the idea that you draft a quarterback in this next draft and Derek Carr starts again next year and you have your quarterback in waiting, quote unquote, and then you go from there after next year and move on from Carr and start whoever. Maybe you can keep Rattler.
I just don't know if they're going to draft a quarterback in the middle rounds 3 years in a row.
Yeah, maybe not. But like you said, I mean, you have to have.
And again, I was for that. Probably the last 2 years, but at this point, like, it's time to start drafting guys that can play. And quarterbacks usually can't play.
Yeah.
You've done it with two of them. You got 2 lottery tickets here. The odds are most lottery tickets end up in the garbage, but you might have one that hits. And so you got to start taking guys in the draft that you need to start hitting on some 5th round picks that can play defensive tackle for you. You need a hit on a 5th round pick that can be a safety. You need Marcus Williams. Y'all know the names, but like, that's where I am from their drafting perspective. The draft is so vital to what they're trying to do now. For them to toss another pick potentially in the trash can with a quarterback, just go with Rattler. See.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree fully. They have to start Carr next year. Like they just have no choice in terms of the money. That after next year, they can probably move on even though they're going to have to eat some of it. But I still think that there is a possibility that they do go and draft on their quarterback next year, just because of Jake Haener probably obviously not being in terms of, and I think we both agree that he's not going to be, going to be around long term. So I would definitely start Rattler for the rest of the season, but that's up to the Saints and Derek Carr, and like you said, Carr is going to play if he can. So
I feel bad like taking Jake Haener and saying one half of football is like
we've seen more than one half.
Yeah, I mean, you've seen some preseason stuff, you've seen some reserve stuff. None of it's in ideal situations, but I just don't see anything that's going to lead me to believe that there's anything there.
I mean, it was a completely opposite terms for the offense. It just looked it completely flipped in the second half when they played Rattler.
Crazy.
There's no way of not seeing it that way.
Glen West, senior writer, Go 24/7 with us next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Genesis of Baton Rouge, genesisofbatonrouge.com. The only fully exclusive Genesis dealer in the state of Louisiana. Right here in Baton Rouge, on Airline Highway at PQ, across from Women's Hospital. If you've never stopped by Genesis, or if you've never thought about a Genesis, or maybe never seen a Genesis, go by and check it out. I promise you will not be disappointed. They offer a luxury experience at a reasonable price. And that luxury means like a 10-year, 100,000-mile warranty. Luxury means 3 years of complimentary maintenance, valet maintenance. They can handle your air filters, oil changes, wiper fluid, all that kind of stuff that is a nuisance to go taken care of. They can handle it. They'll come to you. They'll leave you with a car. They'll take your car back to the dealership, handle all that maintenance, complimentary, send it right on back to you. That's just part of the experience of being a Genesis driver. The experience there is phenomenal. I've spoken with a number of their brand ambassadors over the last couple of months, and they're always phenomenal to work with. And the line of vehicles is just second to none. Go by and check them out, Airline Highway at PQ, or start that process online at genesisofbatonrouge.com, genesisofbatonrouge.com.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
Let's head on out to the Jim's Firearms hotline. That's where we can find our guy Glen West, senior writer at Go 24/7. It's a great time to check them out over there with the portal season up and running. Of course, football bowl game coming up and basketball coverage as well. Glenn, Sonny, and the whole crew over there at Go 24/7 do a great job. We enjoy chatting with Glenn every single Tuesday at 1:30. Glenn, how are you?
I'm doing great, Hunt. Just got about 1 million tabs open on my computer, but we're getting through it. How about you?
How many times do you refresh Twitter a day?
Oh, dude, I would. It would be sad the amount of times I do if I were to like make a guesstimate on that one. It's sad for sure.
It's significant. I get it. It's portal season. What do you make of the comings and goings, big picture? We'll talk about some individually, but do you feel like they're getting better?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think when you're talking about the 7 guys, 5 of them are ranked in the top 100 of our personal 24/7 sports transfer portal rankings, and they've got the number 1 class in the country right now in terms of the transfer portal. They're reeling in high 4-star caliber kind of players and pieces that have started at SEC and Big Ten programs. I mean, I think it's significant, when you have the kind of guys that they're bringing in as opposed to the guys that they're leaving. I know CJ Daniels was one that a lot of people were a little surprised maybe left, but really outside of that, he was the only guy that I think that has left your program that was contributing for you in a major way. These other guys were pretty young guys and ones that weren't really on the field a whole ton for you. So I think to replace some of the depth that they've lost with guys who are starters and guys who can come in and make an instant impact in 2025, I think Brian Kelly and this program is putting its money where its mouth is, and I think you're seeing that reflected in some of the big names they've been able to land so far.
I talked about wide receivers in my first segment today, and I thought they were one guy short, maybe like a number 1. I think Nick Anderson just makes the most sense, and if they can add him, and then you add Aaron Anderson as your number 2, and then you got Chris Hilton, and then Barry and Brown, some of those guys to add depth, and you figure one of those guys will kind of pop for you. I think that sounds better than right now, like Aaron Anderson maybe being your number 1. Where do you think they are at wide receiver right now?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't put past Barry and Brown to be your number one
Yeah.
either. I mean, I think they spent a whole bunch of resources trying to get him on board, and so he's going to be that vertical threat for you. I think if you're able to retain Chris Hilton, he's certainly going to be a vertical threat for you if he can stay healthy. So Aaron Anderson will be certainly in the mix in the slot, a guy that can really just be a reliable returner for Nussmeier and someone that Nuss really trusted in some of those big third down throws. Obviously, the touchdown against Ole Miss there on fourth down was one of the key plays of the entire season. So I think if you get the one big-bodied receiver, and obviously everybody that follows recruiting even loosely or follows the program loosely knows that LSU is in on Oklahoma wide receiver Nick Anderson. We'll see if they can get over the finish line with him, but he would be the guy. I mean, if you go out and you grab hhim with Barry and Brown, you just added Destin Hill today as well. That is, I think, replenishing, and not only just replenishing, but overextending. I think what maybe the expectations were for LSU in terms of landing these elite type receivers and really building that room back up.
What do you make of the Michael Van Buren edition?
I like it. I mean, my initial tweet as soon as I had heard the news was like, I just don't think there's much more of an ideal scenario for LSU in terms of landing a quarterback this offseason. You're talking about a young freshman that got 7 starts in the SEC last year, looked pretty good. He's a pretty mobile guy as well. I know I think before sack adjusted yards, he had about 170 yards rushing and 5 touchdowns. So he's somebody that can scramble a little bit too. He needs some polishing. He needs some work, but I think that's a big reason why he's coming to Baton Rouge. He's going to come here and he's going to develop for a year. And I think that this before after the Bryce Underwood thing happened, you didn't really have a succession plan at quarterback. I think you had a couple of guys that you were hoping could turn into that. I think now you have some competition in that room, guy that's going to push Nussmeier. If Colin Hurley continues to develop, I think that those two, meaning Van Buren and Hurley, will battle it out in 2026. And I think that's a really good position to be in if you're LSU. If you have two guys that are returning to the program that could be competing for that starting spot that are already in the system, I think that would be the ideal scenario. And Van Buren's a guy that has multiple years of eligibility left. So I think it checks off a lot of the boxes that LSU was looking for, and is a really smart and good addition, in my opinion.
So let's talk about the offense as a whole then. We talked wide receiver. I think everyone's comfortable with where they are at running back. Do they need to add on the offensive line in the transfer portal?
I do. Yeah, I think that they're going to add to the offensive line, and I'm probably looking at the interior right now. Another guy that's being really heavily mentioned with LSU and linked with LSU is Virginia Tech center Braylon Moore. I think that would make a lot of sense. I mean, you hate to call it the weak link, but that was what DJ Chester was for LSU on the offensive line this year, and I think that DJ Chester has a really bright future. I think he needs some more development this offseason, but I also think he could be really a solid guard if you were able to move him over to guard and you bring in a veteran that's played a lot of football in Braylon Moore to be the center. I think that would be a guy that could help lead that group and help bring some of these younger players up that you're obviously going to be asking to step up and be contributors next year that weren't starters this season. So, yeah, I think that's going to be extremely important for LSU to try to get another veteran presence in here, and we'll see if they can get across the finish line with a guy like Braylon Moore, or maybe they look at a tackle. I mean, the tackle market, the thing I always say about tackles is like either the really good ones are going to the draft or the schools are going to pay them to stick, to keep them around. So I think the tackle market maybe isn't as fruitful right now as it maybe at some other positions are, but you got some young pieces like Tyree Adams and Weston Davis that you can work in there, and guys that I know that LSU's are excited about. So we'll see kind of what happens there, but I do think that the one guy that people should be monitoring right now is Braylon Moore. Seems to be LSU and Michigan State is what he's kind of limited his schools down to.
That doesn't seem like a hard decision to me, but we'll see what Braylon wants to do. Let's talk about Corey Raymond's group, as he's been pretty busy both in the high school ranks and, of course, in the transfer portal ranks as well. Is it starting to, in your opinion, look a little bit more like DBU back there?
Yeah, I mean, when we're just writing up all of these commitment pieces, you look at the heights and it's 6'1", 6 feet, 190 pounds. I mean, that's just right up Corey Raymond's alley in terms of, the kinds of cornerbacks that he's recruited in the past and had success with. So, yeah, look, Jakeem Jackson was a great pickup. I think that was one we were expecting for a while. And then Delane, Mansour Delane, I think was one that came together pretty quickly, but LSU made the pitch and he wanted to jump on board. And I think that gives you another veteran, another guy that's played a lot of football at a very high level. So very good work in the secondary between those two, and then obviously the trio of cornerbacks you brought in with Pickett and Anding and Jacob Bradford out of the freshman class. And you mentioned all those names, and you still got Ashton Stamps, who was a starter for you this year. You've got PJ Woodland, who played a lot of football for you this year, that could continue to develop. So I think the secondary, particularly at cornerback, you're seeing some really good signs that this group is on the come up, and at least on paper. And now we have to see what they do at safety, because that's the kind of the next benchmark, I think, for LSU to clear defensively.
Glen West, our guest, senior writer over at Go 24/7, all your team coverage. He's got you covered over there. They've got a great staff over at Go 24/7. Let's talk a little bit of hoops here, Glenn. What was the biggest concern for you on Saturday in the loss to SMU?
Well, I mean, the turnovers for sure. The second half turnovers, they had 13 or 14 of them, which really just cost them the game. And LSU has been a pretty good second half team all season long. I think the last two games they have not been a great second half team. They've actually gotten off to better starts and finished poorly. So they've got to get that under control. I mean, they brought in a lot of these senior guards, a lot of these veterans, and you just can't make the kind of turnovers and silly mistakes that they were making late in that game, especially a winnable game, a game that had a lot of quad one opportunities and resume building opportunities for you. So it was a disappointing loss. I think probably the most disappointing of the season, probably over Pitt. Even the Pitt game, I would say that the SMU game was a little bit more disappointing, because of how well I thought they played in the first half. I thought they controlled the first half for the most part, and then just came out and they were a different team in the second half, and not a very good one. So you're going to have a lot of opportunities, obviously, when SEC play comes along to build that resume up. But you would have liked to have seen LSU finish that game a little bit stronger. And I think that the guard play, if they can limit the turnovers, then I think they'll be fine here, especially over the next three games. I mean, I don't think any of these three teams they're playing to close out conference play are particularly good. So you can get to the SEC part of your schedule with two losses. I think that's something that Matt McMahon and his staff would have taken going into the year, and then you just got to get through the gauntlet as best you can and try to operate it as best as you can.
That was a very kind way for you to put the last three non-conference games. They're all terrible teams, in fact, and so I think LSU is going to handle their business in those three. That said, like if you look at the non-conference and you figure that they win these last three, how would you assess that as a whole?
I would say good. I mean, what would have made it great is if they had beaten one of Pitt or SMU. I was thinking maybe the Kansas State or the UCF win might have been a quad one win, but it looks like those teams are also kind of in a little bit of a I wouldn't say downturn, but they're not as good as maybe some people thought they might have been heading into the year. So look, I think the real meat of your schedule is going to be this SEC thing, and if they can navigate it. I mean, like I've been kind of going back and forth on this. What do you think is a respectable win total for an SEC team to make the playoff or to make the NCAA tournament this year? Do you think 8 or 9 wins gets you there? I mean, I think 9 wins for sure, but
9 for sure. I would say 8 almost for sure, because nobody threw up on themselves in the non-conference. Like there's usually a team that's 5-5 in the non-conference, and that point wouldn't get you in. But Mississippi State got in at 8-10 last year, and they didn't set the world on fire in the non-conference. They just didn't implode like LSU did. So I would have a hard time 7-11. That's
I will say in terms of the non-conference schedule, they don't have any bad losses on there. No. So if you go in there and you handle, if you get to 7-8 wins in conference play, I think you make it a decision. And but look, I mean, you've talked about it. I've listened to your show a little bit. The SEC is as loaded as it's ever been in basketball. It's going to be extremely difficult, but we'll see if this team can kind of have the senior leadership that can put it all together to have a respectable record this year. Yeah,
I guess to kind of put it to bow on that, it depends on a little bit what the 8-10 looks like, what the 7-11 looks like. If you can pick one off, I don't even know what their schedule is, quite frankly, where they play at home and road. I'd have to look at it more. If you can win at Florida, if you can win in Knoxville, one of those games, that's a big, big deal. If all your wins are against, Missouri, South Carolina, Vanderbilt, and Oklahoma, whatever, that's not going to mean quite as much. But if you can pick off a couple, I want to say Mississippi State swept Tennessee last year, which is a big deal for them. So it just kind of depends on what it looks like. But I think if LSU gets to 8 wins in the league, I think they'll be a tournament team. But that's going to be real difficult to get to. So we'll see you at the PMAC tonight, Glenn. Thanks, man.
All right. Thanks, Hunt. Appreciate it.
Glen West, senior writer at Go 24/7. Always enjoy our conversations with Glen each and every Tuesday. Still a lot to do in hour number 2 on the show today. I want to talk about LSU's defensive backs and kind of how Corey Raymond is cultivating that team moving forward. I want to talk about this LSU Stetson basketball game coming up tonight because, as we mentioned, Stetson's very bad, but I want to talk about what that Hatters team looks like, and more specifically what I'd like to see from LSU. That's really the key tonight for an 8 o'clock tip-off. Then Sharif's going to join us at 2:30 to talk a little bit about the Saints and kind of where they go from here. And honestly, I'd probably need to talk to Sharif now about the reports that the Pelicans are considering trading just about anybody not named Herb Jones or Yves Missy. It looks like they're in a position where they're going to do some significant overhauling of that roster. So we'll talk to Sharif a little bit about that at the in the bottom of hour number 2. I don't do this a lot, but there are some pretty startling statistics for a team that's that is outside of our market. But sometimes you shoehorn something into the back end of an hour and it's a reasonable talking point. So we'll do that, and then we'll get back to LSU at the top of hour number 2. Don't go anywhere. It's the Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Boudreaux's Electrical Services. Neil Melissa running Boudreaux's Electrical for 40 years. Look, one of the great things about Boudreaux's Electrical is the fact that they've got more than 10 technicians out in the field at a given time. If there's an issue with your Generac home standby generator, they can have someone to your home really quickly to make sure it's up and running. Nobody wants the power to be down for a very long time, and if you've got a generator, you don't want the power down at all. And I'm not just speaking about whether or not a generator comes on when the power goes off. I'm talking about if there's a malfunction at any point, whether it's done mechanically or, like I say, sometimes some of the kids are out in the yard and somebody runs into the generator and may just mess it up. Well, they'll know because they've got remote monitoring technology. So they'll see that there's an issue. They'll call you and say, hey, something happened here. Can we come check it out? They'll go check it out, and they'll make sure that you're up and running so that when the power does go out, which is inevitable down here, you've got the peace of mind to know that you're going to have electricity thanks to the folks at Boudreaux's Electrical. Give them a call at the same number they have had for 40 years, 985-397-1562, 985-397-1562, or a new number right here in Gonzales in the 225. That's 393-89. I give you the easy way every day. It's Boudreaux'Electrical.com, Boudreaux'Electrical.com.
This is the Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
Closing up hour number 1 here, Tuesday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show. Y'all know I do this every once in a while when my Twitter feed in my kind of internet world has a lot of Chicago Cubs in it, as you might expect, and so that bleeds over into the Bears for sure, and then a little bit of the Bulls and a smidge of the Blackhawks. But I get a lot of Bears stuff. And you know that last night did not go very well for the Bears. And the Bears fans, as you might imagine, are in full-blown panic mode that they have gotten the most talented quarterback in the history of the organization, which has just produced dreadful quarterback play for decades. And they felt like they finally had their guy. It was Trubisky, and then it was Fields, and now you got Caleb Williams. And they keep trying, these talented guys, and they keep screwing them up. And they felt like this was the one they really couldn't screw up. He's that talented. He's that good. And they drafted him, and they put a lot of toys and weapons around him. And Ryan Poles, their GM, said it's time to win. Like they intentionally lost last year. Said it's time to win this year. Well, they now lost 8 in a row. They were 4-2, and they've lost every game since. They have not won a road game since November 27th of 2023. That's 13 months as of now. They haven't won a game on U.S. soil since October the 6th, which is a significant amount of time. And they haven't scored in the first half of their last 3 football games. 53-0 has been the score in the first half over the last 3 games. And they made this massive mistake that's just unbelievable. They fired their offensive coordinator, Shane Waldron, because he was doing a terrible job, and the Bears were awful on offense. And so they promoted Thomas Jones to offensive coordinator, and he seemed to be getting Caleb Williams going a little bit. Well, then they fired Eberflus, and they promoted Thomas Jones to head coach and took him away from working with Caleb Williams. They prioritized these meaningless November and December games in a lost season over the development of their young quarterback, who is the only thing that matters in the entire organization. That is organizational dysfunction at its very finest. And the Saints have not been in this situation before where you're trying to nurture a young quarterback that you've taken very early in the draft along. But I think everyone can understand like just how frustrating that can be when you take Trubisky in the top 3 picks in the draft, and then you take Justin Fields, who you traded up for, and then you end up with the lottery ticket that gets you Caleb Williams, and you just can't get any of it to go right ever. That is maddening. And they say you're in the good old days until they're gone. And I think there's a lot of Saints fans remember the Breeze years very, very fondly and understand how quickly it can fall apart on you from a quarterback perspective. Well, the Bears don't even have any good years. They don't have it. They got to the Super Bowl with Rex Grossman back there. Like they had a lot of Jay Cutler years. And that was the highlight. Not to mention the McCowns that they've gone through, and the years of Trubisky and Nick Foles coming in, who was supposed to be good, but then he wasn't. And now they've got the guy, and they're ruining him. Like, it's just, they're terrible. Not scoring in the first half of 3 consecutive NFL games is malpractice. Like, that's just inconceivable. You got to get a field goal. Just can't get it done. No points in the first half of 3 straight games, outscored by more than half 100. Sad times on the lakefront. And now it's really cold there for the next 5 months. But the Cubs got Kyle Tucker, and I'm happy about that. That's it for hour number 1. We're going to come back and talk a little basketball, LSU and Stetson tonight. Also want to talk a little DBU, Corey Raymond, kind of overhauling that entire secondary. What does that kind of look like right now? And how much better is it than a couple of weeks ago? We'll do that in hour number 2, The Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
One Bath and Closets. OneBathAndClosets.com is the website. David Duvall and his team, 30 years redesigning and remodeling bathrooms and closets. You don't have to move to create a better living situation for yourself. You can, but you don't have to. If you got a great interest rate, not looking to move, love the location of your home, but bathroom could use an update. Closet space, not exactly what you're looking for. Have David Duvall and his team come over for a free consultation. That part doesn't cost you anything. Just to have the conversation with David and his team. They can do a full-scale renovation or remodel. Their licensed contractor will be the only call you make. They can also do smaller things. They can handle your closet and not necessarily gut the whole thing. Just use your space a little bit more efficiently. They can do a tub-to-shower conversion in the bathroom. Large projects, small projects, they can handle it at your home. It's David Duvall and One Bath and Closets. I invite you to go to the website, OneBathAndClosets.com. One Bath and Closets. Check them out online. OneBathAndClosets.com.